Welcome back, my friends. I am joined this evening by my good friend, Jeremy Van Wert, and a new guest. Jeremy, tell us all about yourself in case anyone lives under a rock and doesn't know who you are.
My name is Jeremy Van Wert, jeremyvanwert.com. I'm the host of the Mindful Mutiny podcast. I've written books, I do therapy, I do coaching, and I do psychedelic retreats. And so that's what I'm about.
Love it. James Miller is my friend and a newly published author. James, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I was a nurse for a decade. I traveled all over the country working in trauma hospitals. Grew up son of a preacher man in the rural South, Southern Baptist preacher. And I was injured on the job and decided to write a book. And it's not a memoir or anything like that. It's just it's an homage to Femme Fatale of the 1990s.
I love it. Oh, I'm excited to get into this evening's episode. Our question this evening is the silent treatment: why emotional withdrawal is more damaging than active conflict. I'm going to throw it to our therapist first. My way of dealing with conflict is always like head on, right? I'd rather that. But tell us why this is so much more harmful.
Well, I'm taking a contrarian approach here. I think silence is great to be used as a weapon against anybody. It's a fantastic way to exercise passive aggression. It's a great way to make people feel horrible about themselves. And so the thing about silence is that it really can be wielded as a weapon, and it is emotional abandonment. And what it does, particularly with a dynamic when there's children involved, is it teaches children a very, very manipulative way to deal with conflict that is passive aggressive, it's non-direct, and it's not solution focused. Now, we've all had times in our lives when it was probably better that we just not say something. That's different than this. This is silence and abandonment used as a means of manipulation, as a means of winning an argument, as a means of punishment to the other person for not going along with something, or because you're choosing a road that is going to help you win something without merit. And, I think that we all know what it's like to have a friend or somebody that's close to us give us the silent treatment, and it feels there's such a sense of injustice in it. There's such a sense of being devalued in it. And quite honestly, in the confines of a relationship, that does constitute abandonment. I know of parents who have become angry at their teens and have not spoken to the teen for upwards of 6 months to a year, living in the same home because they were disappointed in the teen. This kind of thing causes lifelong damage to the teen because that teen understands love is conditional. To me, living up to a certain thing that's expected of me. And so if you're going to take some time to not talk and to cool off, great. Come back and re-engage in a solution-focused conversation. But if you're going to use silence as a weapon, if you're on the other end of that, it's time to think about the relationship, in my opinion.
I didn't even consider it being passive aggressive, but now that you say it, I'm like, that is a lot more harmful. That's not my pull. That's just not what I would do with it. But I think passive aggressive is one of my least favorite qualities in a human being. It just is. I really don't like that. You just give it to me. Just don't sugarcoat it. Just give it to me, So question for you, James, how long do you think silent treatment is appropriate? And you wrote a book all about relationships, so I think you're qualified to answer this one. How long is silent treatment appropriate for a cool off rather than being passive aggressive and turning this into something else?
I think it varies. I think it's unique to the individual, of course, but I think there comes a point in time where you cross a line of what the kids call ghosting, I guess, or it's really just ignoring the person. But I think I think any amount of time can be appropriate. Sometimes it's just, I just need to step back and, snort, or, get a drink, or, take a trip around my house, uh,
Uh-huh.
just to walk around. But I think that when the silence becomes, like Jeremy so articulately stated, when it becomes a weapon instead of a shield, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think it becomes problematic in that when you weaponize silence instead of using it as a tool in
Mm-hmm.
which to you know bring the emotional level down so that I can communicate like an adult, like a civilized adult, instead of a stark raving lunatic. I think that's a good thing. I myself am not very confrontational, um, but that depends on the situation. It's situational as well.
Sure, sure.
My breaks in my house, I'm going to be very confrontational. But
Sure, sure.
you
You're
know,
right. That is
if
situational. Yeah.
yeah, if someone says, "Hey, I didn't like your book," I'd be like, "Okay, but you bought it."
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of how I feel about criticism. I just kind of take it as it comes, and I've so much has been hurled at me, being in healthcare, that uh, my skin is thick, and but going back to the original point, the people that know us best know how to push our buttons, know what gets
Mm-hmm.
under our skin, know how to manipulate us. And if they're doing those things, then if it's with silence or any tool they have, then like Jeremy said again, probably time to reassess the situation, reassess the relationship.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm confrontational, but I'm definitely direct. And I would rather have a direct conversation. Like if there's a problem, I'd rather come to you and go, "Hey, this was bothersome. Let's talk about it, or let's figure out a new plan, or whatever the thing is."
But that can
But
be
I
cultural,
really,
right?
it
That can be
certainly,
cultural.
certainly,
Yeah.
yeah.
So like
But I
here in the
really feel
South,
like,
it's just
yeah,
different. It's a different animal when you I didn't mean to cut you off. I
no,
apologize.
no,
But
no, no.
I was just thinking, little old ladies in church might not talk
Uh
to
huh.
each other, but they worship together, and their feud might go back 50 years. But when they see each
True.
other in church, they're cordial and they're
Uh huh.
polite, but they could have a real animosity there that goes, subterranean.
Uh
Um,
huh.
so I think some of it is cultural as well. I just think that most of the people I know are, just a little bit more reserved and less likely to, fly off the handle. But maybe that's just my circle. I don't know.
I was raised in a very chaotic home where the silent treatment was never used. I didn't know such things existed.
Same here.
There's a lot of yelling and screaming, but I didn't know about the silent treatment. I didn't know about that until much later on when I was married. And I feel like it's definitely it's a sign of emotional immaturity if that is your go-to rather than having the ability to sit down and be able to take head on whatever the issue is rather than just ghosting somebody. That just seems really immature.
We have a couple of comments here. And,
Oh, I'm glad you're seeing
Alan,
them because I didn't. Thank you, Jeremy.
yeah, Alan said, if my partner goes completely silent during an argument, how can I tell the difference between them just needing a temporary cool off period versus actual toxic stonewalling? And I think that each of these situations is different. I would expect for a partner who is really mad and goes silent to just say, I can't even talk to you right now. I need some time. And that
Mm-hmm.
communication just means I need to regather myself. And
Mm-hmm.
depending upon how awful the thing that happened is, that silent period of cooling, it might take a couple of days. And I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, you just found out that your spouse is cheating on you. I think you can take a couple of days of away time to deal with the whirlwind that goes through your mind. But it's
Mm-hmm.
being used as a weapon when there is no timeline, no effort at saying, I'm staying quiet because I don't have anything good to say to you right now. There's, that right there, it's communication enough to go, okay, well, that's where I stand. I kind of messed up this time. I feel like the cool off period, there should be some communication about, I'm being quiet right now because I can't stand the sight of you and I need this much time
Right.
until we talk. That's my
Yeah,
opinion.
I totally agree. I feel like, yeah, that needs to be communicated. And I am a person that definitely uses that in many situations, especially in business, where, I've had several partners in several different avenues of business where if something's not going right, like, okay, I need to kind of I need to regroup. I need to gather some thoughts and then, we'll come back and rediscuss, we'll circle back. But I want to like get my wits about me before I just say something I don't mean or, come across rude about something. I want to have time to really think that through.
I kind of tend to liken it to digestion.
Uh-huh.
You get the input, and like you said, if it's some kind of issue where a spouse is cheating or something devastating, certainly the hierarchy there, I guess, but something that catastrophic. Like I said, I just liken it to digestion. Some foods just take longer to digest than others, and some come out fiery, and some come without any kind of without even noticing it. But it's the silence. You have to communicate your silence. I think it's like Jeremy said. You expect some kind of input from that person, and so that when they're like, okay, I know that they're in their room or in the gym or whatever, and they're trying to digest what I've just told them or what's happened, and it again, I think it's I've been in relationships myself where people were better with the written word than the spoken word, and she would go and stay in her room for an hour or two and write me a letter. And I didn't expect her to have long drawn out conversations about problems. And we could talk about theory and all these other things all day. But when it came to problematic things, I think she tended to retreat and withdraw from the situation. And she would write a letter to me or a note or something like that. And I just rolled with it because, not everybody speaks the same language and not everybody handles problems in the same way. And there's no right or wrong way if both parties agree on the outcome.
No, I totally agree. I'm a fan of the letter method for, maybe a different reason, just because I think when you have something to say to somebody that may be lost verbally, they're too mad to hear it. I think having something written of like, especially in a situation where you want to come back from whatever the problem was of like, these are all these things I appreciate about you, or this is how I'm feeling right now. Somebody may not be in the headspace to hear what you have to say verbally, but if they can go back and read it again and again and hear what you were really trying to relay, it could be digested better.
Sure. I agree.
What do we think about the letter method, therapist?
I like the letter method because it focuses the thoughts of the person that needs to be communicating. Sometimes it takes that level of focusing in. And this kind of answers the question that Indigo Child asks here. Healthy, actionable alternative to shutting down. This is it. Go write a letter and deliver it. And that focuses all of your thoughts. You can get through things. Sometimes AI can actually help you with organizing your thoughts so that you can get everything out there in a way that's also written well and organized and communicates well without blaming or at least appropriately applying that. Now, there's a couple of other things here because we're kind of talking about this in the confines of a romantic relationship. I know that there have been people in my life that I have called close friends who have betrayed me badly. and I will never speak to them again, even though they have reached out to me and attempted to see where I'm at. I have no desire to be around people who have treated me awful. And in the context of that, I don't necessarily see it as a silent treatment, though it is. I see it as I have turned the page on people who are toxic in my life. And people who are willing to do things like that to you, to stab you in the back, to harm you. There's actual power in walking away from all of that. And some people will interpret it as the silent treatment, or he's throwing a temper tantrum. I think it's really important for you to slam a door on people who would do harm to you, and not accept that sort of thing in your life, and work on yourself in a way that you value yourself more than, number one, the people who are willing to do harm to you, and number two, the people who are willing to hang out with the people who do harm to you.
Couldn't agree more. What's your take on that, James? Especially being in like the Bible Belt where you are, where forgiveness, because I know like forgiveness is such a big thing. We got to forgive everybody. It's for us, not for them. We got to forgive. But where do you stand on that boundary?
My father taught me two things. Forgiveness is a gift that should be given often. And there are only two things that you can control: your attitude and your mouth. Those are the only two things that you can control. And I think that this goes back to being silent. I can't help but think of the scripture that says, a kind word turneth away wrath, a harsh word stirreth up anger. It's the truth. Whether you believe in the Bible or not, that's a true statement. I believe in the Bible, so I believe in that statement 100%. But I think forgiveness is something that it's the hardest gift to give, because you have to let go of what makes you angry in order to give it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to reconcile. It doesn't mean that you have to let those toxic people back into your life, especially if they haven't asked for forgiveness. See, I'm of the belief that I don't wait for people to ask me for forgiveness to give it. Just like I don't expect my mother to ask me for a Christmas gift. I just give it. But I want to touch on one other thing before we abandon the idea of relationships and talking to people other than romantic relationships. One thing I did learn from this girl that I dated for a while was that writing letters and writing things down because she journaled. And I thought it was like a waste. I thought it was a waste of time. I've since been converted away from that. And one of the things that I implemented into my professional life based on my relationship with her was, when people get intimidated when the doctor comes in the room, it's unavoidable. They think that they're wasting the doctor's time if they ask questions. They think that, the doctor just comes in and says, hey, do you have any questions? And they've just received all this information. Maybe it's a bad diagnosis, or maybe it's a good diagnosis, and they have questions. And I tell them, if you have it, and I would tell my patients this, if you have questions, write them down. The doctor does not mind answering questions. In fact, they like it, because they get to show off how smart they are. Maybe get into the thesaurus and use some of those words like recalcitrant, and but all jokes aside, they did like answering questions. It was part of their job. And the doctors that I worked with that wanted, the connection with the patient, they like to engage, but you can't force it. And so I implemented that, write it down so that you don't forget it. And so that when the doctor comes in, because they are busy, they come in, and they're just a whirlwind, and then they're out the door, and then the nurse is standing there saying, okay, let me translate all of that for you. But I found that the patients that did that, I was standing in the room sometimes when patients had written down those questions and asked the doctor, and after the fact, they were almost always told me, or they were always gracious and grateful that I'd given them that suggestion. Because like I said, in an intimidating environment such as that,
Mm-hmm.
communication is so important, and so I think that it's one of those things where if you can write something down, it becomes more polished, and you can get more meaning into the writing than you can the spoken word, especially in a rapid fire situation, or let's say in an emotional situation where
Mm-hmm.
my girlfriend just told me she cheated on me. Then yeah, my instinct is a visceral response, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not a healthy response. A healthy response is, okay, I've taken the information, I've digested it, now let's talk about it like civilized adults, instead of just flying off the handle and maybe cursing, name calling, that kind of stuff. That's
Mm-hmm.
it's churlish and just not helpful. But as
No,
far as
yeah, I totally agree.
yeah, as far as forgiveness though, um, it's one of those things. Like I said, I try to give it as much as I possibly can, but reconciliation, that's a whole other ball of wax, so to speak.
Couldn't agree more. I think there's definitely a boundary. I'm good at forgiveness because I do truly believe it's for me, not for them, right? So it's easy for me to forgive, but I definitely have a better boundary now around, business partners that have stabbed me, family members, whoever it is, that I need to draw a hard line. If you have unhealthy behaviors that are not safe for the other people around you for whatever reason, there's got to be a boundary around that. And I was confused for a long time about what forgiveness meant versus having some boundaries. So I think that's a really important distinction. The journaling, I'm a huge fan of. Like, I love to journal. And I would only imagine that if you are going into some challenging situation, like infidelity, really writing out not only your feelings, but kind of what your hope is, what you hope to gain from going into therapy with your partner, or what you hope to gain in a newfound relationship, if you want to see it through, would be really helpful rather than just running circles around the trauma that you just went through.
I have a question for you about journaling, and Jeremy, you can answer this too if you journal. But what's more helpful to you both? Is it the actual getting your emotions down on paper, or is it reading it a year later and seeing the distance between you and that pain? For me, it was always going back and reading where I was, and seeing the progress. It's kind of like weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
You take a picture of yourself when you start a weight loss journey, and then you see yourself every day. So 2 pounds doesn't look like a lot. Even if you lose 2 pounds a week for 10 weeks, you don't notice it. But when you take a picture and you put them side by side, that's where you can really tell the difference. And so that, for me, journaling is kind of like that. I write stuff down, and it does help get the emotion out. But then a month later, a year later, I go back and read what I wrote, a year ago. And it's like, oh man, I'm definitely not in that place anymore. And I've progressed from there. And that was just as helpful, if not more. And I was just curious about what you guys thought about that.
Tell me, Jeremy, because you're not going to like my answer. Tell me yours.
I love reading a year later, because if you've really been traveling a healing road, the amount of distance that you can travel in a year, in your heart, in your relationships, and all of that, you can read back and just go, wow, look at what I've done. Look at where I've gone in my healing journey. And it is this objective means of measuring the hard work that you're putting into being a better version of yourself. So I really love that.
Yeah, I love that.
So I journal, and then I just throw them away. I get finished with the journal and I'm like, bye, that's done. I don't ever go back and read it. I'm like,
you pour yourself into it. You pour yourself onto the page.
We're done with that. Like, moving on. I'm in a better place now, because I feel like, especially, and I'm going back to a time that, like, I lost my adopted child to cancer, and when we got that diagnosis of what we were walking back into, I was journaling daily, and it was just such a difficult period of day to day of just like navigating. So no, I finished that journal and was like, that's going in the trash. And I think I've thrown every journal thereafter away. I feel like I get it out and I can kind of process how I'm feeling and figure out a better solution. I'm very solution based. I don't want to just complain about it. I want to figure out a solution, best case scenario, what would be helpful. But once I get that kind of out of my system, I'm like, yeah, I never go back and read it.
I think that's okay too.
I think your way.
Well, I mean, I think if you pour yourself out, I think we do this more than we realize. Is we pour ourselves into our career, into our relationships, and if you just pour yourself out onto the page, I don't go back and look at photos that I took when I was at the Grand Canyon. I remember what it looks like. I don't go back and look at videos that I took at a concert because I didn't take any, because I remember being there and I remember the experience. So I tried to, take it all in without, something in my hand so I could remember it later, because I might not remember it exactly the way it was. I might remember it better than it was. Totally. And so when you journal, I think if you just pour yourself out onto the page, then, you don't have to go back and read it for it to be therapeutic, for sure.
Do you find, Jeremy, with clients of yours that you have a better success rate with those that are introspective like that and do journal and take the time to do that kind of work?
Journaling is really important. And it goes hand in hand with a consistent mindfulness practice, so that you're honestly holding yourself accountable to goals that you are setting for yourself. And of course, in the psychedelic world, you do all of this healing in a very fast period of time. And so to journal after that, it's a part of your integration. It's a part of your healing. It's a part of your moving into the next space that you occupy. And so it's definitely something that I recommend wholeheartedly.
I love that. And if somebody wants some more information, I would encourage you to jump onto one of Jeremy's many platforms about the retreats that you have upcoming, because that video you sent me was fire, all about your specials that I'm very interested in. And also just all of the work that you do for free that's out there everywhere about how to meditate and mindfulness and all of the things that you offer and just a value add that are entirely free on social media.
Jeremy Van Wert on TikTok, Jeremy Van Wert on YouTube, jeremyvanwert.com. And there's all sorts of resources there. You can find out about retreats that I'm doing. You can find out about books that I write. You can find out about all sorts of cool stuff.
Where's your next retreat? City and state?
Truckee, California. One spot left. First weekend in June.
I love that place. Jack's on the tracks. Their milkshakes are almost psychedelic.
I'm gonna have to try that.
Very good. They're very good.
It's a great way to sell the retreat. Thank you for asking.
No, I was just interested because I didn't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
I'm interested in. I'll probably after we're done, I'll probably go and check out your info online because you probably don't want to get into it now, but I'm just I was born 1980. I was part of the DARE program. Drugs are bad, and I remember being so angry when I turned about 20, finding out what the HIV rate was in the United States, because they made it sound like everybody had it. And it's like less than 1%. And I was just like, my whole childhood is marred and scarred by, propaganda that I was going to get AIDS from washing my hands next to somebody that had AIDS, and I just, and there are other things that the drug thing that's where I was going with that. Was the drug thing was the exact same thing. It's like, if you do drugs, you're going to wind up doing, unthinkable things in truck stop bathrooms for drugs, and to this day, I've never met anybody that's done that. So it's like some mythos that exists in American culture about drug use. And I'm not a proponent of drug use because I've seen, I mean illicit drugs, drugs that are, harmful to your body, fentanyl, heroin, crack,
sure,
cocaine, that kind of thing. But, with Trump doing the psychedelic or releasing I can't remember the drug right off the bat.
Ibogaine.
Yeah, that's it. And so I got interested in it more and more. I'm not a big podcast guy. I don't listen to Joe Rogan, that kind of stuff. But I knew it from medical journals and research that I'd done on my own. But I just wanted to ask you if that's something that you're a proponent of. And I didn't know if we want to get in that in this podcast or not, but I was very interested in hearing from someone, now that I have you on the spot, what's your take on that is. As a clinician myself.
Yes, psychedelics are by and large not chemically addictive. Psychedelics change your consciousness, and so that you can look at yourself and your life and your spirit in a different space. It's not like the ones that you mentioned here, heroin and methamphetamines and so forth. These medicines specifically are ones that help you in the right set and setting be able to look at yourself, to consider yourself, to do healing, particularly when done in a clinical or ceremonial way. The amount of insight that you can get, they say you can get 15 years of therapy in 4 hours. I mean, it's not even really a joke. It's an amazing way for somebody with trauma, with ADHD, with anxiety, with creative blocks to go into a space where you're not glued to the same way that you've been thinking all along, and you get to expand beyond that and learn to forgive others, learn to forgive yourself, learn to get over old traumas, learn how deeply you are loved by a divine universe that really loves you, and to grieve things that you've been stuffing down inside of you, and to get in touch with emotions that you've been running away from. And so the way in which this medicine stands different from other medicines, even pharmaceuticals that are, I'm just kind of picking on anti-anxiety and antidepressant medications that are meant to dull your senses. These are meant to make you feel your senses. They're meant to push you into that feeling place and to confront things about yourself that you need growth in. And so the way that these medicines have been maligned is if they have any relationship with a medicine like with a drug like crack. It's a travesty that so many people in our civilization have been robbed of the ability to heal in ways that are so far beyond conventional means of talk therapy and so forth.
Wow, that's very articulate. I appreciate the perspective. Like I said, as a clinician myself, I see all kind of drug abuse, and that's typically what you see, because people that use drugs appropriately don't typically end up in the ER. Yeah. And so I just haven't had the experience, of course, but that's very, very well stated. I think about it as being something that makes you look inward instead of dulling your senses. That's a very, very poignant point. Thank you for that. I didn't mean to hijack the podcast. I'm sorry.
Not at all. Let's bring some more business to Jeremy.
I'll always talk about psychedelics.
Well, I feel like if I didn't ask then, it would be awkward later.
Well, you'll have to join us again, James. That's all the time we've got today. But I sure appreciate you guys both. Always a pleasure to have you, Jeremy, and really great seeing you, James. And thank you so much for joining us with no notice at all today, just offering to come and help. Really appreciate it.
That's why I only got a T-shirt on. Next time I'll have a shirt and tie.
Hey, this is a relaxed kind of place. I appreciate you both. Remember to send in all your questions, and until next time.